Welcome back from lunch, everyone. And let us continue our program with our discussion on collective efforts towards strengthening DNS security. In this section, we'll discuss the landscape of DNS abuse and security threats and explore how the community can collectively work towards strengthening DNS security. And please welcome on stage our section moderator, Ms. Rowena Stru, Director Policies and Program at NetBeacon Institute. And can I also invite the panelists for this section to join her on stage? Let's welcome them.
Hello, thank you very much for joining us for this session after lunch. Hope everyone's feeling energized after a nice meal. So my name's Rowena. I'm really happy to be your moderator today. I'm going to start with a bit of an introduction session with a few slides talking about measurement and tools that are available in relation to DNS abuse and security. Then we'll hear from Sean Lloyd from ICANN, followed by Katie from PwC. Then we'll go into some practical examples from registries, with Tree speaking from VNNIC, and then Neha from Radix. And then to finish it up, we'll have about 15 minutes of Q&A and discussion with our panelists. Could I get the next slide, please? Thank you. So the first part of our session is going to focus on measurement. And I wanted to be quite clear up front that measuring DNS abuse is a pretty difficult thing to do. Typically, when people attempt this, they're starting from an imperfect beginning situation, which is that we ingest various types of feeds that are typically designed for network protection, not for DNS level mitigation. And that means that the false positive rate is much more relaxed because they're aimed at protecting an institutional or enterprise network, as opposed to actually mitigating at the DNS level. This kind of means that most measurement efforts are going to be, all measurement efforts are going to be best efforts. They will struggle with the inputs not being designed for their purpose, and they'll need to do a lot of cleaning of those inputs before they can analyze and then eventually present their findings. Some of the challenges we see, particularly in the DNS, is that the data can be quite skewed and the numbers can be quite small, which impacts how we present that and how we try to understand it. Even if you just look at the distribution of domain names, amongst TLDs and amongst registrars, you have two really big players, some medium ones, and then a very, very long tail. And that can sometimes be quite challenging. So what can we do about that? Well, firstly, it's very, very helpful when measurement projects have transparent methodologies so that people can read and understand exactly what they're counting and how. Secondly, I would really encourage people to ask questions of various data presented to them. A big one that we see at the Institute is time periods are often treated differently in different measurement projects. We had one CCTLD look at the data that we provide and compare that with what their local law enforcement was giving them. The lists were wildly different, but once we started digging into them, we realized their local law enforcement agency was counting cumulative over a number of years, whereas our data was focused on 1 month at a time. The time period can also impact how duplicates are counted. So most of these projects will need to do some kind of deduplication, and the time period is going to impact that as well. And finally, probably for presentation purposes, most projects will need to apply some sort of filters or some sort of exclusions. So it's worth digging into those as well. Finally, I just wanted to give you a bit of a taste of what the Institute offers. So the NetBeacon Institute is part of Public Interest Registry, who run the top level domain registry for .org. PIR is a charity registered in the US, and that means that the money they make from running.org gets reinvested into efforts in the public purpose. And that means for the Institute that everything we offer for registries and registrars is completely free. These services are much more outward focused. The Institute aims to help all TLDs and all registrars manage DNS abuse. So we have a reporting service. We provide educational content. The educational content is, for example, includes a generic abuse policy that you can take and adjust to your own local circumstances. We provide you with data, including an individualized dashboard. And of course, we speak at events like this one and meet with stakeholders. So I did want to just mention briefly that our reporting service, which is called NetBeacon Reporter, and a collaboration with our partner Clean DNS, who donated the original development work to create this. This first focused on GTLDs and aimed to get reports of DNS abuse to registrars with the best quality evidence available. It also aimed to make it easier for people trying to report abuse so that they could do that at scale. Now we've reached the point where we're integrating CCTLDs. We have quite a lot on board. On my back of an envelope maths, it adds up to about at least 60% of the CCTLD ecosystem, but it's pretty skewed towards Europe, and I would like to change that. So you can see a few of our regional CCTLDs have integrated, but I would love to have more of them in there. So please do talk to us if you would like to integrate and receive reports. We just need an abuse reporting email. It's very, very simple. And then you can either manage those or distribute them to your local registrars as appropriate. All right, that's all from me. Please do come and chat to me afterwards if you would like to access any of those free services. Could I get the next slide deck for our next speaker, please? Okay. I think it was meant to be Sean second. So the ICANN one, yeah, perfect. All right, so I'd like to welcome up on stage with me Sean Lloyd from ICANN. He's going to talk to you about some of the measurement tools that ICANN have available.
Thank you, Rowena. Hello, everyone. My name's Sean Lloyd, and I'm going to talk today. I'm going to introduce the team I work in, first of all, and then I'll talk about the measurement work that we do at ICANN. So I work in the office of the Chief Technology Officer in ICANN in a small team down there called SSR Research. So that's Stability, Security, and Resiliency Research. And we're a bunch of academics who take that approach, that use of data, and apply that to the problems that we see facing the community. So what the system that we're going to talk about is called Domain Metrica. And it's a system actually very similar to what we've just seen. It takes various different data sets. It looks at reputation block lists. It looks at zone files. It looks at any other data source that we have access to. And it combines that together to produce statistics, to produce things that you can plot, like charts or trends over time. And access to this system is available to anyone with an ICANN account. So if you go to domainmetrica.icann.org, use the account details that you use to register for this meeting, and you can get access to all of the stuff that we're about to see. So when you think about metrics and measurements, it's useful to know what the baseline is. So if you're going to look at something specific, you need something to compare it to. So the first thing that we show in the system is an overview. It's basically the unfiltered view, what you see across the whole spectrum that we're looking at. So we're looking at specifically DNS abuse. And you can see here the headline figures, how many domains that we look at through the GTLD zone files. How many of those actually have abuse reports? And then we break that down into abuse reports by specific types. So we've got phishing, we've got malware, and we've got botnet command and control. And we can also show what that looks like over time. So how have these things evolved? But there's not many people for whom that's going to be the end of the story. You're probably more interested in a specific sector, a specific TLD, a specific registrar, or maybe even a specific domain. So we have the ability to search. You can search for a specific domain. And if you do that, you get some sort of background information. Who's the sponsoring registrar? When was it created? What DNS settings does it have? But we can also show, do we have any active abuse reports for that domain? Who are they from? And what is it being reported for? What abuse type has been seen on that domain? We also include the Tranco popularity, because that can be interesting if you see a sudden spike in popularity, or it at least gives you an idea of how many users potentially are visiting that particular domain. So that's one way of searching, but maybe you're interested in a specific TLD. So you can search for that as well. And again, we give some background information. We give the breakdown of abuse by the different types that we're measuring. And we also show trends in those over time. So this can be shown either as a raw count or as percentages, because another thing that you can do in this view is you can add other TLDs to compare it to. And that only makes sense if you account for the size of the TLD. Raw counts won't do you much good at that point. Another thing that we've done with this system in the top right, kind of hidden by the little icon of me there, there's two links that allow you to download the data. So for all of this stuff, you can extract the data from the system, because maybe you have some data set on your side of the fence that it makes sense for you to combine it with. So we allow you to get that either through this user interface, the web interface, or there's also an API that you can use to get raw data. Everything that we saw there with the TLD, you can also do by registrar, incidentally. So you can search for a registrar, you can see the abuse breakdown and the trends over time. But the other thing that we've managed to get is if you log in as a contracted party, as a registry or a registrar, we can give you access to the actual domains that are building up into those statistics. So you can download the list of everything, not quite everything that we know about in your TLD, on your registrar, sorry, that we've seen on the lists. The caveat to that is that our licenses only allow us to share a certain proportion, because obviously these are commercial entities providing this data, and so we can only share a certain amount, but hopefully there's enough in there to be of use and of interest. So that's my final slide. I'll hand back to Rowena for the next speaker.
Very efficient. Come grab a seat. So those were both examples of some of the free tools and services that are available through ICANN and through the Institute for GTLDs and registrars. I'm now going to welcome up on stage KT Garn from PwC. Hi, KT. He's going to present some research that he's been working on.
Hello. Yeah, probably prefer to use a stand mic. That's okay. Yeah, so I got about 10 minutes, I guess. So what I'm going to do is divide into two parts. The first part, probably some of you saw me talking this morning. So I'm coming from a security community. So I just want to share a bit of the threat landscape, what kind of hacking activities that we observe, in particular in this region, and also global. That'll be the first sessions. And how is that linked to DNS abuse? And like I mentioned this morning, we did a one-day research over the top 5 GTLDs in Hong Kong, not in Hong Kong, in Asia. And we got our hypothesis put in, and we will share that on our research as well. Okay. Just from a threat landscape perspective, so I'm sure everyone heard about ransomware. And again, ransomware is still one of the biggest threat that is affecting the community or the industry. So there's a major disruption of some of the, not sure you all heard about Lockbit. Lockbit is one of very major ransomware as a service, very successful. They hacked thousands of companies and they earn a lot of money out of that. So that ransomware group has been disrupted as we enforce by the US and the collective effort by the US and the UK government, actually. So what does that mean? Basically, when a Lockbit being disrupted, a lot of affiliates that work with them, they're unable to get paid. The operation has stopped. So what has happened since then? A lot of affiliates that have been working with the ransomware, they came out and started a lot smaller ransomware groups. So the smaller ransomware group, the implication to the enterprise or the companies is that they become very unpredictable. The way they do their attacks is very new and is not very consistent with like the major ransomware group. So that gives a bit of challenge to the industry because there's new playbooks that they are doing, new tactics, and because they're running in a smaller scale, so sometimes they behave very unprofessionally. Actually, you'll be surprised, actually a major ransomware group like Lockbit, they're actually very professional like PwC. And a lot of people asked me 10 years ago, if you pay for the decryption key, likely they might not honor, but if you ask me in today's world, I'm not encouraging anyone to pay the ransomware. But if you ever need to do so, obviously not good to fund the bad guys, but if you ever do that, actually the credibility for them to honor their decryption key is 99%, 99.9. And the reason why they do that is because they want to maintain a reputation so that when you pay, you actually can get decrypted. So they can actually earn more money out of that. So actually, I just wanted to say the major ransomware organization, they're very structured. They run by SOP, exactly like a big banks or big consulting firm like PwC. But unfortunately, that has been disrupted last year. So now we see a lot smaller group. They very misbehave, very unpredictable. Sometimes we negotiate with them, they can disappear for 5 days. So making a bit difficult for the industry to respond to that. That's one trend that we picked up, okay? This is ransomware stuff. Obviously, a couple more trends that we see. We see the switch of the attack against the infrastructure towards identity-based attack, okay? Let me just explain that a little bit. So obviously, the digital space, like I mentioned this morning, becoming bigger, a lot more usage over cloud, over SaaS platform, and we see a lot more sophisticated when it comes to phishing. Obviously, that was backed by DNS or malicious domain. So we see a lot more sophisticated phishing attack that can also bypass with the MFA. If you're interested to know how they do that, I can explain to you offline because it's quite technical in nature. But actually, the phishing that we picked up today, they actually can bypass the MFA. Okay? So that's the other trend that we see, stealing a lot of identity-based of information. Again, identity-based information is not just username or password. That includes the way how the cyberspace authenticate a person, e.g. using an SS token. If you go into how the SaaS platform, how they authenticate a person using a token. So that's, we see a lot stolen of information of the access token as well. And the other thing, again, like I mentioned, scamming, malicious domain, phishing, farming, because of Gen AI, we see a lot more activities there. The birth of Gen AI basically is a double-edged sword. Obviously, there's a lot of benefit when it comes to AI. You know, we can use that to automate, scale out of our process. But of course, we also see that the threat actors are using AI in supporting of their work. basically with the birth of Gen AI, contents that we see today become commodities. People who cannot speak that particular language can use Gen AI to create more sophisticated message and start scamming or phishing the victim through different channels like SMS, WhatsApp, email, etc. Okay, so that's another trend that we see. Identity-based attack, AI-driven kind of attack, and also the deepfake, again, it was as a result of the AI as well. Okay. In the interest of time, I'm going to skip that as I talked about that already. Yeah, so a couple of things, just want to share a bit more. Just this morning, I talked about the CVE. CVE basically how it tracks the vulnerability of the software. I would say that you probably heard of a term called 0 day. I hope you all heard of this term before. 0 day is probably by far, I would say, one of the biggest issues that we have in the IT industry. Okay, why do I say that? Does anyone know that the highest bug bounty, that means if any one of you here who has the capability of a hacking skill and you're able to find a bug of a particular software, so the highest bug that will get paid to a security researcher is by Apple. They are putting up $1 million for one bug, one critical bug. If you find an important bug on iOS, okay, and you give it to Apple, after they validate it, they will give you $1 million US dollar. But I want to ask everyone a question. If you have an Apple bug, will you give it to Apple for $1 million US dollar? I see a lot of smile. Well, I personally won't. Why? Money is too small. Maybe 100 million US dollar is Apple. So that is the problem. If I don't give it to Apple, they are not aware. If they're not aware, there's no patch. But I have. And I've sold it in the market, and people have it. So that is the problem. We see a lot more CVE, a 0 day, being weaponized by the threat actors, and we see the ecosystem has been disrupted, especially from the bug bounty ecosystem. So we see that again continue to be a harming and alarming issue in the IT software industry. That's one biggest issue on the CVE management side, okay? And on the other hand, what we have seen, again, like I mentioned, is a more sophisticated phishing. With the malicious domain that they create, and they actually now, what they do is basically they phish, and then they will divert you to the real site. So what an end user or layman person, basically, while they see the link, they click on the link, they're actually going to that real site, but in between, actually exists a reverse proxy. And the reverse proxy is sniffing all the SS token that has been accessing in between. So again, this sort of tactic is very sophisticated, obviously more proper setup from an infrastructure perspective. But then the token that has been stolen by the attacker can actually, use to access banking, email, all different clients of cloud and SaaS platform. Okay, so that's another trend that I picked up. Okay, in the interest of time, again, I'm going to push this down and go straight to the research that we did on the DNS abuse side. Okay, so let's jump to this very quickly. Okay, so like I mentioned this morning, what we have done is that we use a couple of data points. Okay, we take the DNS record in particular from some of the crowdsourced data. Like I mentioned, we use VirusTotal, and we maintain our own intelligence database as well. So we have certain IPs that we track, and we have certain threat actors activities we track as well. In a combination, we have run through 5 hypotheses. Okay, so first, again, I'm from Hong Kong. We pick those popular domain. For example, like 7-Eleven is pretty popular in Hong Kong. So we pick those brands that is very popular in Hong Kong, used by a lot of citizens. We find a domain similarity. Okay, so again, that is typo squatting. I'm sure you know that sort of technique, that what the attacker they are doing. So there's one thing that we do. We find a domain similarity, and then we find a DNS record, like I mentioned. A website is resolved to an IP address, to an infrastructure that's been reported malicious. Okay, and again, reported malicious can be a crowdsource. We use OSINT. Again, we use VirusTotal as well. And we look at the reputation of the IP address. Okay, so with that, we also believe that the DNS record is malicious. In combination, also we use the whois information where possible. The whois information that we use is the similar register. If you look at some of the threat actors when they do things, they use a similar email sometimes. They register a few domain, and the email has been reported, register different abuse domain. So we use that as one of our hypotheses as well. And the other one is the website structure. Like I mentioned this morning, a lot of phishing websites, basically, they will steal the website coding of the original website. So when you do a scan over the website structure, it's almost 99% similar. And you probably imagine if you create a new website, with your own development, it's very rarely that you find that the whole website structure is similar. Okay, so again, these are all our 5 hypotheses that we use, and we run that through the top 5 GTLDs in Asia against the major 20. Sorry, what we did. And if you look at the numbers here, I'm sorry to put this up. Maybe may offended some of the TLDs here, but this is the numbers that we picked up that we think that they are considered as malicious. So some is like 36%, and average is 13%. So if you look at numbers here, it's not low. Like I mentioned this morning, I only use the data in Hong Kong that I run through the Asia GTLD. The typo squatting, I only focus on the brand for a city like Hong Kong of 7 million population. I could have extended my research to look into all these DNS abuse across Asia Pac, but obviously I need some support. I need some local intelligence. What are the famous brands that exist in particular jurisdiction, and then I can extend my research as well. So again, that is the outcome that I picked up one day. And these are the numbers that I picked up. Like I mentioned this morning, everyone has probably different definition when it comes to DNS abuse. I think Alban put up the slide on the e-banking side. Again, we have our definitions. We show it to you. Again, happy to discuss offline or debate about it. And this is the way how we report a potential phishing email to a CISO of an organization. And that's how we detect it. And some of these domains, they may not have found a victim yet, like I mentioned this morning. So there's been put up, but they have not actually got a victim. Or actually, I don't know. If there's a victim, it goes to the police enforcement, which I don't. So again, that's our one-day research. Yeah, so I got 3 more slides, but I think I'm going to skip that in the interest of time. So I'm going to pass the time back to Rowena. Thank you.
Thank you, Katie. Do you want to just go to the one with the data again for 1 second? I just wanted to check was when you're saying, for example, .top 36%, is that 36% of the domains that you were looking at were in .top as opposed to the others?
Correct. So it's the 36% of. So what we have done is that we look into 1 day of the newly registered domain of that TLD.
Okay.
So out of the newly registered domain of that TLD of that day, 36 is considered as malicious per our hypothesis.
Oh, okay. So you're saying new registrations on that day, you believe that 36% of those were malicious?
Correct. Not historical, only newly registered.
Wow, that's quite a big number.
Yep.
Okay, thank you very much, Katie. Grab a seat. We're going to move along, and before we go to to questions. So I would like to invite Tree up on stage with me to speak to us a bit about the approach to abuse within VNIC. So we're now moving on to our sort of second section of presentations where we're looking at examples of what registries are doing. So starting with the ccTLD with .vn, and then we'll be moving to Radix. Take it away.
That's a PDF, so I'll have to run the slides manually. Thank you.
Okay. Hello everyone. My name is Sri. I'm from VNIC, and today I will introduce about the DNS abuse mitigating program of the VNIC. And as a speaker from the ICANN and from the NetBeacon and the PwC Dark Lab has mentioned the importance of the DNS system and the issue about the DNS abuse. Thus, we need to mitigate the DNS abuse on to make the DNS make the internet in secure. And globally and here in Vietnam, we have been making strong efforts to implement solution to minimize the DNS abuse, like not just stay to the slide. And from the institutional support and legislation and the regulation, we have been and continue to focus on and ensuring the safety and security of the internet operation in Vietnam, and many of the legal framework we has introduced quite early. And besides that, we have been implement the first technical solution like DNS Unicast, DNSSEC, and DNS abuse to mitigate the DNS abuse. For the DNS system, .vn, and for the Vietnam. Next slide, please. Recently, we have implemented the eKYC. We use eKYC for the the domain name for the .vn, and this contribute to reducing the identified fraud and impersonal and information theft to protect the user from the internet to when they register the new domain name. And next slide, please. And notably, we have developed a comprehensive plan under the DNS abuse mitigating program that we call the DNS abuse report portal. And we launched the DNS abuse report portal in last year, and to provide the user can connect to report all of the activity related to the DNS abuse, like phishing, malware, or spam, or botnet. And as now we have received, next slide, please. Just in the state that we have deployed the DNS abuse report portal, we receive all of the report from the user, and to analyze, to compare, and to processing the DNS abuse on the DNS abuse report portal of the VNIC. And for the processing, we registry and registrar of the .vn to communicate and to process all of the DNS abuse report, and to determine that either abuse or not, and respond for this user that we have been resolved the DNS abuse case. And next slide, please. And from now we got maybe under 5,000 DNS review report from the user and include over 1,500 the domains like domain.vn, and 100% that was resolved. And next slide, please. And in the next phase, we will deploy. I mean, we will deploy the to receive the report, to receive the data from the another sources, like from the maybe for the spam domain provider like a fish tank, or like a spam house to provide the domain related to the .vn is include the DNS abuse, and we will deploy the we use the AI and machine learning in the analyze the DNS traffic and to detect the domain name registry from the early to detect it look like the DNS abuse or not. And in particular, we will deploy the DNS traffic analysis and leverage AI machine learning technologies to detect and identify the potentially abusive activities of the .vn. And that's all my presentation, and thank you for the listening. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Tree. Thank you for that great presentation. Grab a seat with us. It's really great to see that you're also doing transparency reports on how much abuse you have. I think that's something I often don't see registries or registrars doing. Sometimes people feel it's bad to show that they have abuse, but I think actually it's very useful to show that you're proactive and doing work on this, and it's very helpful to publish those. All right, our final speaker. I would like to invite Neha Nair up onto the stage. Neha's going to tell us a little bit from a GTLD perspective about what Radix is doing. And after this, we'll be going to questions. I have a few for the panel, but also start thinking of your own, start writing them down. If you put them in the comments in the Zoom room, I can read them out if you're virtual. So yeah, passing over to Neha.
Thanks, Rowena. Hello, everyone. I'm Neha from Radix Registry. Next slide, please. So before diving into abuse numbers, those of you who do not know about Radix, Radix is one of the largest registry operators for NTLDs out there. We run 10 NTLDs and 1 CCTLD, and recently we have launched 2 second-level domains as well. Radix has close to 9 million domains under management and expanding, and some of our most popular TLDs are .online, site, store, and .tech. Next slide, please. Thank you. So a majority of our operations are focused in the North America and in Europe, but you can see that Asia Pacific is a very important market for us. We have over 50 registrar partners and growing, and that is why our abuse operations also have special focus on things happening in Asia Pacific region. Next slide. So before diving into specific trends of abuse in this region, Radix as a registry has its in-house abuse mitigation team. We have a very lean and mighty team of 5 full-time employees who collect DNS abuse reports from almost 30 vendors out there in the market, and we do our in-house investigations, and reports that have credible evidence are actioned in-house as well, depending on the understanding that we have with that particular registrar. So most of the abuse issues that we see on our TLDs are global in nature. You receive phishing from everywhere in the world. You receive spam operations from everywhere in the world. However, there are a few abuse types that are very prominent in Asia Pacific region, at least of late. They move from one region to another and become prevalent everywhere, but of late we have seen some trends happening more in Asia Pacific regions, and those trends are We have seen a lot of phishing happening on subdomains in this region, making it one layer more complex to mitigate. Then we see strategic mass registrations happening. So for example, until a year ago, you would see mass registrations, abusers registering 5,000 domains, 10,000 domains at bulk, but now you see batches of 15 domain names, 20 domain names getting registered every few minutes, making it very hard to detect them. Then we have fake shops, very prominent in this region. I know this has been very heavily discussed in the last few days, and I can share a few examples as well later in the discussion. Malware distribution, something new that we have of late observed is the trend of distributing malware and even ransomware through parked domains. This is something that we had not seen, but of late we have received complaints about domains that had been parked but had been part of traffic distribution systems, and there have been ads running there, and those ads contains malware. And because many of those type of abuse are geo-fenced, it's very hard to investigate those and very hard to take action on those. And sometimes the volumes are so large that even at registry level, when you have verified, you cannot just take action. In fact, even registrars cannot take action. So then you have to go multiple level down and bring all the parties in conversation and then see what is the best way to resolve these kind of issues. So these are the major trends. Can we move on to the next slide, please? Yeah. So overall at Radix, we try to adopt this approach of working very closely with registrars. But in Asia Pacific region, this is done way more closely because of multiple reasons. And here, with most of the registrar partners, we have a direct communication channels, because if abuse reports happen, they usually come in very large numbers and they escalate really fast. And in those cases, email is not the fastest way to collaborate. So we try to have a direct communication channel via Signal, via Slack, or anything else. And this has been really, really helpful. We have recently taken down a very large fake shop operations, roughly 30,000 domain names in under 2 days, because we were actively talking with the registrars. We also have with some registrar partners direct data sharing agreement as well. We share suspicion list, we share abuse feeds, we also share real-time data through API integration. And this is in its very early stages, but we want to go a step further, and we are trying to build a sandbox in collaboration with some of our registrar partners so that we can do deeper investigation and research on some specific kinds of abuse. So that's the approach so far. Next slide, please. Yeah. So we have seen visible reduction in abuse and visible improvement in name quality with registrars with whom we have partnerships. It's an ongoing work. We still have difficult conversations to navigate through. For example, because this is a growth market, this is a very price sensitive market, and price versus abuse is a difficult and sensitive conversation to have. So that is something that is work in progress. And there are language and localization challenges as well in this region, which makes partners hesitant to sometimes work with international partners. So that is also something that we are treading very carefully but diligently. So it's a work in progress. It's a journey. We know it's going to take time, but I think continuing on this path is the only way. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Neha. Grab a seat and join us for our panel discussion. I think, did you mention that you were seeing malware distributed via parked pages? Ooh, okay. It should be on if you just speak into it.
Is it on? Yes. Yes. This was something new to me as well. Do you want to know more about it?
Yes.
I don't know how much can I share about it, but yeah, a few days ago, we started receiving reports on these domain names that were parked, and we thought they're not doing harm to anyone. And we looked at those reports, and they were roughly 4,000 names or something. So it's also not something that we could ignore because it's a large number. we reached out to registrar and we did not see much on the report. We could not verify at our end. We did not realize that the abuse was geofenced. So we didn't see anything, but because there were large numbers, we did not want to ignore them as well. We asked the registrar to take a look into it. And this is a registrar with whom we have a very trusted relationship. They really act fast on whatever we send to them. They could not find anything. So we went back to the reporter and asked, is there something that more you can share? And they got on a call with us. They showed that through different VPN systems that there are, through which we could verify that these are geofenced abuse. And even the registrar couldn't do something because they had partnerships with parking companies who are monetizing these ads. So they had to talk to the advertisers who were running these ads, and then they figured out. And when we went deeper into the investigations, it turned out it was not 4,000 names, it was close to 40,000 names that were being impacted, just Radix names, and there were other more. So the investigation is still going on, and that's why I'm a little hesitant to speak, but they are working through it. So this was something new. I did not know park domains can spread malware and ransomware at this scale.
Thank you for sharing. I hadn't heard that really mentioned much before. So now is going to be our panel discussion and our time for questions. So if you do have questions, start lining up. I'll put them in the Zoom chat. I will kick us off. Our first question was going to be mainly directed at Neha and Tree. I wanted to ask you, of the problems that you face or the challenges you experience, is there anything sort of unique in the APAC region in relation to abuse that you see as a challenge? And do you have any ideas that you'd like to share around how we might be able to work together to move past those challenges? Tree?
Hello. Thank you for your question. Just, I think the big challenge that when we were facing with the DNS abuse, that about the data, because that's data we just received the DNS abuse report from the user. It means the positive way, positive solution to get the data, and then I think if we need to mitigate the DNS abuse in the good way, I think we should maybe sharing the data from the multi-provider to provide for the spam for the abusive domain name to the registry or registrar. Then they have more information to investigate, to make the investigation and to process to determine that, I mean, to addressing the DNS abuse for that. And I think the good idea for the mitigate the DNS abuse that we should detect the the newly domain names that have been registered, and we should maybe we should monitor or we should monitor the new domain that we have any related thing to the DNS abuse.
Thank you, Tree. So focusing on new registrations to try to find malicious registrations, domains that are registered for the purpose of DNS abuse quite early on. Yeah, because we do see a large amount of domains where it's a case of compromise and it's a legitimate website, but the CMS or another part has been compromised. So I think you're saying focus on the new registrations so that you can mitigate them with more confidence. Yeah. Neha?
I agree with everything that Tree said. And at least in our observation, abuse on newly registered domains, so the malicious registrations are way more in this region as compared to some other regions. We see less of compromise cases here in general. So that's why we also tend to focus a lot on new registrations. Second, I think I already covered this, that because this is a price sensitive market and growth market for a lot of partners. It's very difficult. Pricing is a very difficult tool to deter abuse here. You cannot dramatically raise prices because it impacts everything that we stand for at ICANN and in this industry, right? Making DNS available to everyone. So that's also harder. And also language issues also and localization issues make it harder to automate detection systems and things like that. So there are things, I think these issues will persist, but I think it's good to be aware of these issues so that then you can work towards addressing them better.
Thank you, Neha. I'm just going to give our other panelists a chance to come in if they'd like to, and then I'll take a question from the floor. So Sean and Katie, is there anything specific about the APAC region that you'd like to comment on in respect of your research and your efforts and any solutions or ideas that you have?
Yeah, so one observation, and it's not actually specific to this region, but when we look at our measurement platform, it all relies on that underlying data, the data sets that we bring into the system. And we're conscious of the fact that there are geographic, lingual, or character set kind of blind spots within those data sets that we consume. It's not just APAC. If you think of LACNIC, we have the same kind of issue where it's not we see nothing, but our suspicion is we see a very much underreported rate compared to what we would see in North America and Europe, for example. And I don't really have a solution other than we try and broaden the data sets that we ingest, but that takes time, money, and effort to kind of get the right data coming in.
Thanks, Sean. Katie?
Yeah, I then just quickly add, right? So I mean, it's glad to hear that some TLDs are, because what I often hear is that, I think, again, maybe this is not unique to Asia as well. I think probably similar across the continent. So what I often see is like the abuse report, the user reported, and then how many has been taken down. But the way I see that, that's a bit reactive, right? If you look at the research that I did with 5 hypotheses that I disclosed, right? Again, we can talk about whether the hypothesis was accurate, not accurate, but that's basically the analytics that we run over the zone file, right? And in my view, like I mentioned, like this morning as well, I think there are a lot of other similar practices that I see in the industry. May not relevant to domain, but for example, like banks, right? So obviously bank will need to take the fraudulent account when it's being reported. They need to investigate. But in bank themselves, they also have an AML, they do transaction monitoring. And the bank needs to demonstrate that they have second line of defense, they have a third line of defense from a governance perspective. They also have a process in place that they proactively detect fraudulent account or account has been abused to launder money. So, I mean, it's good to see that some of the TLDs are moving into that. Because I do think that there's a lot of hypotheses that we can run in order to detect that rather than we wait for a victim that falling into the scam, lost their money, report to police, then only we take down. So I just wanted to add that.
Thanks, Katie. Yeah, we certainly see some similarities on occasion between certain attacks where there are potentially similarities in the domain name, for example, the structure. And so we had a session earlier this week about pivoting on that information and seeing if you can then find others sort of spiderwebbing out from that initial confirmed report. Okay, I'm going to take a question from the floor. Alan?
Thank you very much. Alan Woods from Clean DNS. And I apologize to Rowena, I said I wouldn't talk, but yes, here I am. So my question is, having listened to all of you, and thank you very much for that, the one thing I haven't really heard about is the validation of the reports that you receive from the individual reporters. And that's something, it's part of the conversation we've had for many years, that there is a difference between a report of abuse and a verified report of abuse, because it is you know, it's a truth of this industry that a lot of the reports or the reporters were originally set up for reasons not intended for the DNS and dealing with issues such as this at the DNS level. They are wonderful for what they do and for the purpose for which they were created. But once you start digging down as a person who is trying to enforce a contract or to take due process into account, it becomes a little bit scary. So I'm not going to mention any names, obviously, that's not my role, but one of the reporters I saw mentioned, and in at least two of the presentations there, we did a Clean DNS, a full 6-month dive over 3 very large clients. And over that 6-month point, we found that 4.4% of 200,000 plus reports given to us were capable of being escalated onwards to a registrar. That is a lot of effort that we had to put in for that. So I want to ask the question of what are the efforts? And I know NetBeacon, absolutely, they have their methodology paper, and I really, I love the fact that you can dig down into what their methodology is for NetBeacon Map. What are the verification and the validation that you go through in order to do that? And how do you do that at scale? Thank you.
So Alan, was that directed at someone in particular, or?
I mean, it could be anyone. To be honest, it is an overarching problem that I think registries and registrars do need to contend with. So when we're having conversations like this, it's important to ask, how do we validate?
So it's kind of like you start with like trying to understand how much abuse there is from an academic perspective, but how do you get from there to like, this is an actionable report?
Correct.
That could have DNS level action on it. I mean, I won't speak too much about ours because I think we've discussed that quite a bit before, but I'm happy to turn it over to our speakers if they would like to talk to that. I know Katie is new to the ICANN space. We talk a lot about the level of evidence that's required for DNS level mitigation, because you're not just blocking it at a network, you're taking it out of a zone. So I think that's kind of the heart of what Alan's question is. Would you like to respond?
Yeah, so I probably can talk about that I mean, I don't represent the TLD, but obviously I do analytics and I report that. So I'm on the other side. So again, when I report with evidence. And exactly what I show on the slide just now, right? We are a couple of ways that we think that's the way we should be able to find. And when we work with TLDs, whether it's CCTL or GTLDs, when we report with all this evidence. And these are the evidences that we picked up with proper IP address, proper screenshots. It's almost like writing up like this morning I talked about that also. Like when I report a CVE, let's say to Apple, I can't just say I found a bug, right? I must able to write up a paper, and I almost need to have screenshots and how I can reperform to show that I actually can bypass the code and able to inject something. So I think that's why I always think like abuse the word. Like this morning, I hear different interpretation. Like when I talk to police enforcer, again, I mentioned this many times already. When I talk to police, they say, oh, there's no victim yet. Okay. Then they cannot take action. I'm like, huh? So everyone has different interpretation, the way I see it. So, but again, I'm representing security. That's the way we define as phishing and malicious, and we're willing to supply that as part of our submission. And in order to do that at scale, just a quick answer, I've not done that, but I think AI can help you. For sure. Actually, if LLM for sure can help you. If you have a predefined format that you receive an abuse report, like say your TOC, this is the way you should write and supplement. Once you have that, ask the AI to learn, this is the proper abuse report. And when the new report was submitted, maybe it's 1,000 or whatever, actually the more abuse report, the good sample abuse report that you have to fit into, say OpenAI or Llama or DeepSeek, the more you fit to them, this is a good one, this is the bad one. And whenever you receive the new one, you just say, is this a good one or bad one? That can become your tier 1 of triage, a good quality report. And not just good quality report, you can even give feedback, what is missing. So if you want to communicate to the user who reported that, use the AI and then look into that, come up with a feedback, and then I don't recommend straight through. I still think human in the loop is important. So at least the first triage can come up with something, and then your analyst can review that and then feedback to the user. Yeah.
Thanks, Kitty. So kind of a combination of the using computers and humans to get to the best decision point. And I guess I would say as well, there are risks associated with suspending a domain if it turns out not to be abusive, but there are risks associated with leaving it up if it is abusive as well. So it's always going to be a difficult balancing act for the person who's pressing the button. Okay, we've got one question online. We're quickly coming up to time, so this might have to be our last question, and I'll just give everyone a quick 30 seconds to say their closing remark as well. So Neha, as short as you can keep this concise answer, we've received a question, and you might not be able to say anything about this ongoing investigation, but it was about those ones you talked about at the start. And the question's from Michael Pelage. He is asking if you can tell us whether those were all registered under one or multiple contact ROIDs. I guess he means registrant IDs perhaps. And he's wondering whether there is any verification taken, which you might not know this off the top of your head, so don't feel you have to answer if you can't.
Yeah, I think I'll have to get back on this because I think I might not have sufficient information to respond to it right now.
Okay. All right, so in the last few minutes, oh, Nico, make it snappy.
Thank you. Nico Caballero, I'm the GAG chair for the record. So I have a quick question indirectly related to the DNS security, right? So the question is, how far ahead do you guys see the potential threat or not maybe of quantum computing in terms of configuration of the DNSSEC cryptographic symmetric or asymmetric keys?
That was an extremely technical question about quantum computing. I'm not sure if everybody has an answer on that, but what I'm going to do is go across our panelists and say, if you want to answer Nico's question, and then one closing remark, and then everybody can have a closing remark.
Oh, I just wanted to say that, like from our experience of responding to some of the threat, we have not picked that up. And are we thinking if it's that sort of level of attack, that would be for sure is a state sponsor. For sure will be a state sponsor. Yeah. So like ransomware, financial motivated, like threat actor is basically too much of effort. Phishing, much more easy, and they make more money. Ransomware definitely make more money through that way. So.
Thank you, Katie. All right, one final remark from each of our panelists. I'll start with Sean and then go Tree and then Neha.
Thank you. I think the one thing that I see, and I've heard various times throughout the week, is that data in isolation is not very useful. When you share data, when you combine it with other stuff, you get a much better picture of what's going on. And you can understand then when something changes and whether that change is positive or negative in any particular context. So share data, combine it, helps you understand.
Thank you, Sean.
Yeah, I guess just, I think this is one of the biggest problem that human beings is facing, right? Like I mentioned this morning, a lot of innovation that human beings doing now, like the top 10 company, all the effort that we put in relies on fundamental internet infrastructure. And clearly we see that the cybercrime rate is on its rise. And I think this problem will be only solvable if you combine strength of public sector, government, internet organization, security people, vendor, different stakeholders contribute different views, then only we can solve this problem. If not, our human innovation will be wasted.
Thank you, Katie. Tree.
Hello. For me, I think if we want to mitigate the DNS abuse and we I mean, make the internet is more secure. And I think we should share share the information and to cooperate with each other from the ICANN, from the registry and registrar and the maybe into the registrian and the end user to I mean to work with in the like a on the maybe in the procedure or in the technical things, everything we should cooperation to protect the DNS.
Thank you, Tree. And Neha?
Thank you. +1 to what everyone said. Yeah, share data, but also look at data objectively. It's important that we move away from what we call as trusted reporters. I think there are no trusted reporters. It should be trusted reports because anyone can make mistakes and act on them and reduce collateral damages. Given the kind of action we take, it's important we do that.
Wonderful. Thank you so much to all of our panelists. If we could give them a final round of applause.
Thanks to our moderator and speaker for your sharing, and as well the audience for your interesting question. And may I now invite you to stay at the center of the stage for the photo together, please. Please stay on the stage. We have a photo. Thank you very much. Ladies and gentlemen, and we will now have a short tea break before our next section at 2:45 p.m. See you again later. Thank you, everyone.